Links to previous episodes are given in the video description, so don't forget to like, subscribe and share the video. Frozen Heart, Fated Soul. Episode 13. Chapter 115. Kiera, it had been 3 days since we returned, and we had made our way straight to the Blood Moon Pack. It felt strange to return here, knowing that it was no longer my pack. Not to mention the eyes that followed me, everyone addressed me as Queen Luna. I felt strange. Being apart from Alejandro for even a few hours was difficult, and I realized how important the mate bond was. Not to mention, I felt extra possessive of him whenever a she-wolf checked him out. I didn't have much time to ponder over it. We were busy planning and preparing for Endora. With Grandma Amelia's help, we were searching for the land where the witch may have been buried. We needed to stop her before she was able to do whatever strange plans she had in mind. I had told Grandma Amelia, Damon, and Liam about my baby, but apart from that, we were still keeping it a secret. Auntie Indy was not doing great. She didn't leave her room and refused to even speak to Alejandro when he had requested it. He almost lost it and would have snapped if I hadn't been there to calm him down. I knew his patience was wearing thin and I knew that I wouldn't be able to contain him for much longer. It was now just after training. Alejandro had joined Liam and the rest. I had joined in, and without my ankle flaring up, I was faster than ever, not to mention being mated to the Lichen King himself gave me more strength too. I wiped the sweat from my forehead as I bent over. I was glad training was over for the day. I looked at the 3 men who were on the floor breathing heavily. Each one looked stunned or in awe. If I wasn't so breathless, I would have found it funny. Not to mention, Alejandro had watched them dangerously as we sparred. I'm sure they were scared to attack me and had stuck to defense for most of the match. It seems like our queen is rather strong. Let's spar. Mom's voice came from behind me. My heart thumped as I turned to look at her. I wasn't the only strong female around. Yes, Mom and I always sparred, but I was never able to defeat her and we never sparred in public. Dad stood by Mom's side, and Alejandro crossed his arms. I bit my lip trying not to admire how food he looked. My eyes dipping to his defined V and the urge to drop to my knees and lick a growl snapped me out of my thoughts, and I blushed, seeing Alejandro staring at me. Keep thinking that, amor mio, and I'll lose control. His voice came through the link. Even my wolf felt restless at those words. I wouldn't mind. Ahem. Mom said smirking, and I knew she knew we were mind-linking. Maybe later. I added, before looking at her. Seems like your mate's going to be knocked on her A.SS by mine. Alejandro remarked to Dad. I'm rooting for them both. He replied. I moved back and looked at Mom. Are we doing hand-to-hand or weapons? Hand-to-hand should be fine. She replied, running her fingers through her hair. I nodded and we began circling. Everyone was watching, whilst Raven stood there with a smirk on her face. Good luck, ladies. Show these men how queens spar. Can you not be so loud? Damon whispered, prodding her waist. I didn't miss Liam glance between them, frowning slightly as he looked away. I didn't have time to ponder on it when Mom was in front of me in a flash. I blocked, slamming her to the side. Her eyes widened in surprise before she spun around and aimed a kick at me. Mom and I had always had very different styles. Although Mom taught me, she always went for the offense, I was the type to go for the defense unless I needed to resort to violence. We were a blur of kicks and punches. Sparring with Mom was like a dance perfected over years of practice. The only difference was, I was stronger, faster and more agile than before. I gasped when I kicked Mom straight in the chest, knocking her back. I had expected her to block that. Dad was by her side, but Mom raised her hand. Her eyes flashed silver. "I'm fine. That was a good one. Let's carry on." I heard Alejandro snicker, and I glared at him as Dad looked at Mom in concern. "I'm fine, baby." Mom reassured him. "Wow, go Kia!" Raven whistled. Dad nodded and stepped away, arms crossed as he gave Alejandro a murderous glare. "For now. Until she knocks you again." Alejandro mocked. Mom frowned at him, and I sighed. He loved to annoy my parents a lot. Then again, he liked to annoy everyone. I swear by Selene, he is so different when it comes to me. Mom lunged at me but I blocked her before doing a flip and aiming a kick at her knee. After feigning a punch, I crouched down and kicked her hard in the stomach. She staggered back, coughing, and I really didn't want to hurt her anymore. I needed to end this. Spinning around, I lunged at her. She raised her arm, but weirdly she was slower than normal, that or I was a lot faster. I grabbed her by the shoulders, slamming her to the ground as I straddled her, pinning her wrists by her head. Gasps filled the training grounds and Mom stared at me completely shocked. "Wow!" Liam whistled. "I win?" I asked stunned, as claps broke out. "You're fast!" Mom exclaimed, stunned. "There's only one person who I know is faster," Dad said, coming over as I got off Mom. He helped her up. I knew he meant Alejandro. Dad smiled proudly at me before kissing Mom, and I took her hand, letting my healing rush through her. I knew I had probably left a few bruises on her. "That's my girl," Alejandro said, motioning for me to come over. I walked over, not missing how the sun glinted off him. I wrapped my arms around his neck, and he placed his hands on me as he kissed me. I heard Dad growl the moment Alejandro squeezed me. "What is your problem?" he asked Dad when we broke away. Liam dismissed the warriors, and I was glad. I did not want a showdown. "That's my daughter," Dad said, disapprovingly. "Yeah, at least she ain't my sister." Alejandro shot back with a cold glare. I sighed. Did he have to go there? "Elijah," Mom said. "Alejandro," I whispered, caressing his arms. "Just saying, I don't appreciate anyone telling me what I should and shouldn't do with my mate," he growled, glaring at Dad. "I'm not a kid." I knew things were tense with the upcoming events, not to mention Auntie Indy was really irritating Alejandro. His patience was wearing out. He also hated Damon around me, something which was hard to avoid considering he was the future beta of this pack. It's called having some control in front of her father. Dad growled. "Dad, come on," Liam said, frowning. Like me, he knew things were not going to go well if this continued. "Just the way you have control, hey." Alejandro remarked. Okay, can I not leave you two alone for even an hour? Raphael's voice came, and I breathed in relief. Shall we get to some actual planning rather than you two just snapping at each other's throats? Stay out of my business. Alejandro shot at him, before turning his murderous gaze towards Dad. She's mine, and what I do to her is none of your business. I mean, you should know what goes down between mates. Just picture that and 10 times more. He added tauntingly. I closed my eyes as Dad growled and Mom had to pull him back. I ran my hand down Alejandro's chest, kissing his neck. Calm down. What's wrong? I asked quietly. I knew there was more to it than he was letting on. Everyone was on edge, snapping at each other's necks, but we needed to remain rational. Nothing. He sighed, wrapping his arms around me, and once again he placed his hand on me. He couldn't keep his hands off of me and already told me he loved me in yoga pants. I just hoped Dad wouldn't speak this time. Sure enough, I saw Dad walk off ahead, heading back towards home, his anger rolling off him in waves. Like always, we would shower and then get to planning. With each passing day, things were becoming tenser, and I was worried too. Many of Alejandro's men would be coming here and some already were, working on setting up traps and making it harder to breach the pack. However, this pack was not built as securely as Alejandro's, and there were too many trees around. Too many places to hide. There was also the fact that all packs were exposed, and we were riding on Dulsanra's words. Everyone had been uncertain, apart from Rayhan and I, both of whom believed her. So the decision was made, Darien would remain at our pack, and Rayhan would head his dad's pack. Marcel had joined us here last night as well, and although Alejandro didn't trust him completely, I did. It was later in the morning, and we had all showered, eaten, and were now in the meeting room, with Beta Aaron, Dad, Raphael, Mom, Damon, Marcel, Liam, and Alpha Alan. Although other alphas would be helping, we were keeping the plan as secret as possible. I still think we're missing something. Something big, Alejandro growled, turning his back to the table as he lit a cigarette. Like what? Liam asked. If I knew, I would tell you. Alejandro replied coldly, taking a long drag of his cigarette. We need to organize the front line. Dad said quietly. I need you at the front, RAF. Alejandro said, now glancing at his brother. Andorra said you couldn't be influenced. It must be something to do with having a hybrid for a mother. You may be the only one able to get to her. I also need you to get her necklace. I can face her too. I piped in. All eyes snapped to me. I'm not risking you at the front. Alejandro said, quietly. So, you will risk Raphael? I asked. It makes sense, Kiera. Raphael said gently. No, it didn't. Look, Alejandro. You saw what happened in that cavern. You didn't have a chance, neither did Marcel. Maybe this was why we were paired, why I, a blessed wolf, was born. There must be something we need to do. Maybe Andorra is that evil we need to defeat. I said quietly. I of all people don't want to say this, but the Queen is correct. You need her in the front lines. Alan said quietly. I knew what everyone was thinking about, my pregnancy. I knew if Alan knew, he may not have agreed either, but I did need to do this. I can't risk her. Alejandro said quietly, resting his hand on the window frame, his back to us all. I'm willing to forsake everything for her. His voice was thick with emotions, and my heart ached hearing him sound so scared. It was fear in his voice. I walked over to him, wrapping my arms around him from behind. You won't be, you'll be right there with me, I said quietly. I could hear his heart thudding, his restlessness. There's a chance you may have got something from Kiera too. Mates make each other stronger. Maybe now that you're mated to Kiera, there's something you've improved in, something that would help against Endora. Mom said. Dad sighed. We have to admit, the witch is strong. We need to try to make sure the battle ends fast. Rafael, Alejandro, me, Scarlett, and Kiera will fight in the front lines, is that fine, Alejandro? I could feel his pain, but he still accepted that Mom and I were not ordinary she-wolves. I knew he didn't want Mom there or me, but living with someone like Mom, an alpha, he knew he had to step down. I think it was this that made him realize I had to do this. You're asking me to risk her life? Alejandro replied, now turning as he looked at Dad coldly, wrapping his arms around me possessively. I'm her father. How do you think I feel? I'm being realistic here. You know, we need her. To minimize the loss of our people. Do forgive me, but Elijah is right, if you're defeated in the front line, do you really think she won't get hurt? Remember, Endora wants her. Beta Aaron asked. I don't think she's going to just walk in and attack. It will be a surprise. I'm assuming she's already seen wolves on the move. Liam said quietly. I want to be at the front too. Marcel said. I have a score to settle before that. You need to initiate your rogues into your pack. I know you are all happy to be lone wolves, but you need the mind link. You need become a proper alpha first. Alejandro said coldly. I don't want to force anyone. Marcel growled. Well then give them an option, I'm sure they'll agree. They're already at your beck and call. Can everyone just calm down? Seriously, there seems to be so much anger and restlessness in this room in itself. Liam said, sighing. Damon nodded. Liam's right, I know things aren't perfect, but we need to work as a team. Alejandro, I know you like to work alone, especially in combat. You are used to it, but we will need a team this time. Marcel, Alejandro isn't WIing, you need to unite the rogues, and Endora was probably the one who probably instilled in you that becoming a pack was not ideal. If you become a pack you've got some independence. Something she probably didn't want. I added. Kia's right. Damon frowned. I think we need to split the powerhouses into two, though. Just in case, Liam nodded in agreement. The door opened and Auntie Indigo stepped inside. I'm in too. She said quietly, her eyes held bags under them. She had lost a lot of weight too, and she looked pale. I don't. She shrieked before Dad could even finish, I need to do something or I'll go crazy. Okay, Mom said, softly going over to her. She moved away, not looking at Mom. "You're pregnant? Are you going to risk the pup?" Alejandro asked. I knew I was pregnant as well, but unlike me, Anta didn't have any special abilities. "As if you care, you killed its father already. One more dead, I'm sure you wouldn't even bat an eyelid." She spat venomously. That wasn't fair. It hurt to hear her say that about him when he had done this for her. He had done what Mom and Dad wanted to do too, he became the bad guy alone. But I also knew she was hurting. The room went silent, and a heavy tension fell. Thick darkness swirled through the room. Alejandro's eyes flashed, his aura suffocating everyone but me. "Remember who you're talking to. He deserved it," he said coldly. "That was my decision to make," she shouted, her eyes flashing, her teeth and claws elongating. "Too bad he was part of my pack." Alejandro shot back coldly. "I tried to prevent him, but he refused." Stopped. Auntie Indy glared at him until she was forced to submit. "My only regret, I didn't send him off to a more painful death," she gasped, and I knew those words must have stung. After all, he had been her mate. "Alejandro, baby please," I whispered, pleadingly. But he refused to listen. "Karma is a horrible thing, Alpha. I wonder how you'd feel if Kiara suffered like me." "Indy." Mom gasped. I kept my face passive. She was hurting. She didn't mean that. She was only trying to hurt Alejandro. Imagine if she was pregnant. And you died. Then I'm sure none of you would be there telling her to move on and just act okay. She shouted. "Indigo, stop," Dad said. He looked pale, but he had his emotions in check. If only she knew how I knew those words were a possibility. How I knew, even if I dare not speak it. I was scared to lose him. I knew he'd risk his all. For our kind. It terrified me day and night, and neither I nor Alejandro dared speak of it. Although, I knew it must have crossed his mind too. I may be a monster. You've had enough time playing the victim. He broke you, and you've become a pathetic excuse of who you once were. Fix yourself up. I hate you. You're a monster." Anta cried, her entire body shaking as she fought against his alpha aura. Before I could even comprehend what was happening, Alejandro slashed her across her mate mark. The smell of blood and the splash of blood shocking me to the core. "I, Alpha Alejandro Rossi, exile you from the Night Walker's pack. Effective immediately." His cold, emotionless voice rang in the room. My heart was pounding as I realized he had just cut the link with her. I felt the gut-wrenching pull in my chest before the emptiness that followed. She stepped back, the 3 claw marks dripping blood down her shoulder as the rest in the room remained silent. Everyone was shell-shocked and all I could hear were their thudding hearts. Exiles were rare. Usually, people joined one pack to another, breaking the old tie, but this method was brutal. Those marks would always remain upon her, and to make it worse, they had destroyed her mate mark. One of the only things she had left to remember her mate by. Mom looked pale as she stood there, frozen. No one moved until Alejandro pushed past Bo. "Alejandro," her words rang in my head, saying exactly what I was worried about. If I hadn't met my desire, I wouldn't have cared. If I was killed no one would have cared, but for Kiera, I had to stay alive. Indigo had become a shell of the woman she once was, and it scared me that if anything were to happen to me. Is that what would happen to Kiera? Just the thought made my blood run cold. I ran my hand through my hair, smoking my cigarette. I needed to stop thinking like this. Baby. Kiera's voice came as she walked over to me, placing her hand on my waist as she looked up at me. Her eyes were full of concern. Relax. I am relaxing. I wrapped my arms around her and pulled her against me. Inhaling her scent, my hand resting on her. Why are you so stressed? She asked, now looking up at me with concern in her eyes. I couldn't tell her what I was scared of. Yet, I was afraid. I simply shook my head, despite seeing the flicker of hurt in her eyes. She knew I was hiding something, and I knew she knew. She hugged me tightly and I caressed her back, kissing her shoulder. Talk to me. She whispered. I closed my eyes. I couldn't. I just need to know what her plan is. I muttered. She moved back, cupping my face. She knew I lied, but she said nothing, kissing me deeply. I hugged her tight, my cigarette loosely between two fingers in my hand on her, the other tangling into her hair as I kissed her. We will be okay. She said so quietly that I almost didn't hear. Her heart was pounding. So, she knew what was bothering me without me even having to speak. I moved back, caressing her cheek before I dropped to my knees and wrapped my arms around her waist, burying my head against her stomach. Kissing it tenderly as I inhaled her intoxicating scent. She wrapped her arms around my head, caressing my hair. I hated this feeling of not knowing. I was feeling what every single one of my warriors felt when I threw them into the unknown. I never understood those emotions when they bid farewell to their mates. I never wanted to feel this hopeless. But at the same time, if it meant having her in my life, I was willing to do anything and feel anything to keep her forever. Ale, Raphael trailed off and I moved back, standing up smoothly. Schooling my face into an emotionless mask. I turned and looked at him coldly. What do you want? Sorry. I just wanted to make sure you're okay. He said quietly. I raised an eyebrow, taking a drag of my cigarette. And why wouldn't I be? I asked. He shook his head, giving me a small sad smile. No reason. A thick silence fell between us before Raphael scratched the back of his head. I'll leave you two to it. I think we all need to unwind. Maybe we should do something. Kiera said suddenly. Like? Raphael asked, sounding like a hopeful pup. He's like 40 plus. Oh. I have the perfect idea. I looked at her and there it was, that Cheshire Cat smile. My desire was up to something and I wasn't sure I trusted her. I exchanged looks with Raphael as Kiera giggled to herself, a pout on her face. Yeah, I'm right. She's up to. Ouch. Careful, Elijah. Scarlet snapped. I clenched my jaw. The smell of burnt onions was up my nose and this kitchen was too tight for 6 men. Yeah, this was Kiera's idea, that I, Elijah, Marcel, Raphael, Liam and that Damon should have a cooking competition. How she got everyone to join in was beyond me. To make worse, the most annoying women were on the judging panel. Yet, Scarlet, Raven the old hag Amelia, and then there was Kiera, the exception. Despite this being her idea, I couldn't stay annoyed at her. When she had handed me an apron, I had tossed it in the trash. I was in no way wearing that. Come on, boys. Get moving. Rogue Alpha. Do you seriously not know how to turn that on? Raven remarked. Her annoying as voice grating in my ears. Elijah mewed, almost bumping into Raphael. Do I need to do this? I mean, I'm not an alpha, Damon protested. Yet, why was he here for? Leave. I remarked, earning a frown from Kiera. Baby, what are you making? Scarlet asked, looking annoyed as Elijah spilt some on her cooker. I smirked. He's cooking by the looks of it. Almost everyone burst into laughter as Elijah growled at me. Well, it looked like that anyway. What was that supposed to be? Gravy? What about you, Liam? What are you making? Raven asked, tilting her head. Liam gave her a small smirk. Unlike the rest of these guys, I actually know how to make a few bits. I'm not trying to impress anyone. But it's turning out good. He said with a small pout as he looked at his baking tray. He was making a cake. Men don't make cake. What was he? Eh? Oh, Liam, are you making your Victoria sponge? Kiera asked, leaning over the counter. Well, almost. She was hot as hell. Seems like the little prissy is just another princess. Elijah, were you not man enough to raise an alpha? Look at that, you have yourself a cake baking boy. Amelia added. These women sure were brutal. They all began laughing, although Scarlet gave her son an apologetic look. Liam rolled his eyes. Cooking and baking does not make me any less of a man, he stated, giving them a look. And I think he's actually handling this. Raphael murmured. I smirked. Now there was a who really was losing. He had never cooked in his life, and I knew Maria never let him touch. Well, he was paying for it now. What are you talking? A salad? I asked, mockingly. Cutting veg takes skills. Raphael replied, well, I know all you men seem to talk really big. Let's see if you are actually capable of making dinner. I'm glad you ladies called me to witness this. 6 oafs trying to cook. Amelia remarked, sipping her tea. The 4 women were sitting at the counter on the stools, and it was annoying. Not going to help me, amor mio? Nope. But if you win, I'll give you something tonight, she replied suggestively. I glanced at her, feeling myself throb. You'd give me that anyway, I replied. At least guide me. Sorry. How about you win and I'll dress as a pretty little maid for you? She teased. That image was hot. Are you two cheating? Raven asked sharply. No. Kiera protested. I looked at the pan that held the grilled chicken. I was trying to make some fillets to create some burgers. The image of Kiera in a tiny maid outfit was kinky. Fine. You better have a good outfit, I growled through the link. She smirked. Oh, I know exactly where to get one, so you better win. I intended to. I tasted the spices, maybe a bit more salt. Oh. Damon swore as he took his burned onions out of the cooker for the second time. How stupid was he? I gave him a cold glare, and glanced around at the so-called competition. After a quick look, I think my only competition was either Marcel or Liam. Marcel was working silently, but he seemed to know what he was doing. Plus, Cake Boy. He looked at me and I frowned at him. I forget he's Kiara's twin. What you looking at? I frowned. You were actually looking at me first, Alpha. He said, with a small smile. I ignored him and got back to flipping my chicken. Music was playing lightly in the background, and I looked around as Marcel pointed something out to Raphael. Elijah was frowning as Raphael slapped his back whilst Damon and Liam were snickering over the burned onions. I glanced at the women, seeing them laughing and pointing. My eyes met Kiara's and I realized this had actually lessened the tension. I knew she had tried to get Indigo to join but she had refused and stayed in her room. I walked over to her, leaning on the counter and reaching over to kiss her lips. Sizzling sparks rushed through me when mine met Hey Plush One's. She sighed against my lips, her fingers tugging at my necklaces. Raven whistled. No bribing the judge. Scarlet said, waving me back. Kiara blushed, her heart pounding as I gave her a smike and walked back to my pan, narrowing my eyes at Damon, who had been eyeing it. Touch it or try sabotaging me and I'll castrate you. I growled. Liam smirked as Damon raised his hands in mock surrender. Amelia snorted. He at least says it as it is. She remarked to Kiara. He does. Kiara replied softly. I stabbed the chicken, I was definitely going to win this. Looks good, Alpha. Liam said, looking over my shoulder. I frowned at him. Alejandro's fine, I said coldly. Why did I say that? Ah. That pint-sized brat cooed. Yeah, see, I shouldn't have spoken. I love you. Kiara's voice came in my head. Same, amor mio. I did not want to do this, but he was Kiara's brother. He grinned at me, and it was then that Damon put his elbow on my shoulder. Can I call you Al too? No. It's Alpha to you. I frowned. Alejandro then. He said, smirking. I'm Kiara's friend. Yeah. I said, shrugging him off and taking my chicken pieces out of the pan. Should we be honored that Al is actually cooking for us? Raphael remarked. They began agreeing and I just had to picture Kiara in a little kinky outfit to keep my cool. Indigo, I could hear them all downstairs through the open window, laughing, joking and teasing. The pain that clawed at my chest hurt more than I could ever put into words. They said losing a mate was like losing half your soul. And it did feel like that. It tore me apart from the inside. The worst part was I didn't even get the chance to ask Fred where I was lacking. I know deep down it isn't my fault, it was never my fault. I wanted to believe that. But was I really completely broken? Every time he went to another she-wolf, it broke me. Looking into the eyes of those women who couldn't even meet my gaze because they knew he was meant to be my mate. I broke into tears, hating how I was stuck in this vicious cycle. I wrapped my arms around my knees, feeling useless. I had grown up witnessing my mother's recovery from abuse, both physical and mental. Experiencing it, I felt so weak, too weak to escape. I didn't know when it became my life. But even then, I still loved Fred. I know Alejandro, in his own twisted way, wanted to help. He always showed me some compassion. In his own way, he looked out for his pack members, but I hated how he made this decision for me. Guilt consumed me, remembering what I had said earlier. I could never wish that on Kiera. In my anger towards Alejandro, I had hurt her too. Even after what I said, Elle and Scar were still very supportive. All Elle said was that he would rejoin me in their pack. Scar had simply told me things would get better, that this was not the end. I had our pup too. The only thing I had left of him. I broke into tears, rocking myself. How do you get over someone that you love so deeply that you simply take all their crap in your stride? There was a knock on the door. I knew it was Scarlett and Kiera by their scent. The door opened and they stepped inside. I looked at them, similar yet so different. Strong, beautiful women. Kiera was holding a tray of food, whilst Scarlett held 3 cans of fizzy. The boys cooked. Some may not be edible, but some is actually really good. Scar said as Kiera placed the tray on the bed next to me. I looked up at her, her soft blue eyes still holding all that love and kindness they always did. Why wasn't she angry at me? Didn't I attack her mate? My eyes stung with tears, and I looked down at the tray. There was a grilled chicken burger with cheese, salad, and mayo, a potato salad, some weird meat with some gloopy gravy, some strangely burned. I don't know what it was, but I was sure it had rice in it. Then there was a cheesy pasta and a soft sponge cake. What is this? I asked, prodding the burned mush. Damon's Chinese rice. Kiera said, sitting down next to me. It's off-putting, I murmured, then looked at the weird meat and gloop. And this? The steak and gravy were made by my baby, and he failed big time. But he looked hot in an apron with his sleeves rolled up, Scarlett said, sitting opposite Kiera and me. Okay, eat up. Kiera said with a small smile. I looked at the burger, picked it up and took a bite. It was actually nice, a little spicy but tasty. Oh, this is good, I said, trying to fight my tears back. I wanted to feel better, but for so many years, Fred had been everything to me. He slowly distanced me from my family until I felt that he was everything and all I had. I missed him so much. I couldn't swallow the second bite of my burger and put it down. Scarlett opened a can and passed it to me. I took a sip. Turning away, Kiera took the can from me and wrapped her arm around me. Auntie, please. I know things aren't easy, but you will get through this. She whispered, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to sound like a sick. I'm just. Fred was everything to me. You're hurting, it's okay. Kiera said, pressing her cheek against mine. I touched my neck, knowing that those thin scars would remain as they were linked to an exile. I never thought he'd do that. But I knew I had hit a nerve. I poked at the pasta as Scarlett opened a can for Kiara, then took the last for herself. You know, the amount of mess they made is stressing me out, she said, ruffling her red hair. And I dismissed the omegas for tonight. I took a bite of the pasta, it was really good. I smiled softly, eating some more, the melted cheese making it easier to swallow. Marcel made that. He actually won the competition. Two certain alphas couldn't talk that though, Scarlett said, laughing. I don't even think Dad should have gotten huffy, he did terribly. Kiara said, winkling her nose. When things get sorted, we need a girls' weekend away, Scarlett suggested. Oh, definitely. That would be great. Kiara agreed. I murmured. I put my fork down, not wanting anything else. At least taste Liam's cake, Scarlett urged. I broke a piece off and ate it, his mate will be lucky. He makes amazing cakes like both of you, I whispered. I touched my stomach, this child will never have a father. And what was I meant to say to it? That your father was abusive and was sentenced to death? At the same time, I wondered if Fred was alive. Would he have cared for our child? Or would he have tormented it too? He knew I was pregnant yet still beat me. Maybe I was better alone, but it hurt. It hurt so much. We're always here for you, Auntie. Kiara whispered. She pulled me into her arms and I simply cried my eyes out, wishing life wasn't so painful. I didn't realize when Scarlett removed the tray and joined our hug. Will I be able to recover from this? Shouldn't mates die together? How were some strong enough to survive? All I could see was darkness. There was no hope, there was nothing left for me. Kiara's and Scarlett's comforting voices faded away as I sat there, feeling numb. Knowing they would return to their mates. But me? I'd be here all alone, in the end, I was still hurting, with or without him. This pain would never end. Kiara, they were both hurting, Alejandro and Auntie Indy. I knew Alejandro was afraid to lose me. No matter how much he denied it or wouldn't speak of it. Auntie's words about him getting killed and leaving me hit him hard. I had seen it when he stormed out. Even if he raised his walls, I could sense a person's emotions. His fear. His love. His concern. It broke my heart seeing my king so vulnerable. He was always the heartless one, or portrayed himself to be, but now that he had finally let himself love. We were facing a witch. One who was powerful and fueled by dark magic. Strong enough to be a risk to us all. I was scared too, scared to lose my happily ever after before it had even begun. I entered my old bedroom after we had spent the last hour with Auntie Indy. Only to see Alejandro standing there with a towel wrapped around his waist, water trickling down his body and getting dangerously low. Goddess, I wouldn't mind being those droplets right now. I licked my lips, my throat feeling dry. My core clenched at how smoking hot he looked. He glanced at me, strands of his black hair falling in front of his eyes. Another one of the things that made me dripping wet. Are you just going to stand there, amor mio? Or will you shut the door? I blinked, then shut the door behind me, locking it before walking over to him. You showered already? I ran my fingers through his wet strands of hair. I smelt of burnt onions. he replied with a deep frown, pulling me against him. My heart pounded as I rested my head against his chest. Desire rushed through me, but more than that, I needed him, his embrace, his closeness, his comfort. "Hey! What happened?" he asked, threading his hand into my hair as he tugged my head up to look at him. I shook my head, making a kissy face, asking kiss. He smirked, bending down and kissing me softly. "Nothing happened," I said through the link. My wolf was restless, and so was I. "Girl, calm down," I said to her, sighing. "Doesn't seem like I just... I'm scared too," I said, fighting back the tears that I didn't even know were building up. "Nothing's going to happen, okay?" he whispered, his deep voice thick and husky as he sat down on the bed and pulled me into his lap. "When I think of the future, I feel sick, like something bad is going to happen," I whispered. The overwhelming emotions that hit me every time I tried to focus on the upcoming day overcame me once again. He didn't speak for a moment, holding me tight. "It doesn't matter. Whatever happens, we'll get through it. I promise you, nothing will happen to you. Or to our pup," he said quietly, running his fingers through my hair as he kissed the top of my head. His voice held complete confidence. "Promise me nothing will happen to you," I whispered, my heart thudding. I needed that promise, I needed him to tell me. His heart was racing, and it terrified me. "I promise that I'll try my best to come out of this unscathed. Andorra is my mother, and it's my job to end this. But I will give it my all to come out of this alive." His words squeezed at my heart painfully, crushing me completely. He didn't promise me that he'll be okay, he only promised he'd try. I couldn't speak as he simply held me. His thundering heart felt like my lifeline as I curled against his chest, letting the tears slip down my cheeks. A king and a queen. The titles were pretty, but never had I realized how heavy the weight of those titles were. It was our duty to protect our people, no matter the cost. Neither of us spoke. He only bent down, kissing my wet cheek. I wasn't sure when he made us lie down or when he slipped my shoes off, but the sheer weight of knowing that anything could happen in a matter of days weighs heavily on me. All I could do was clutch onto the man that I loved so dearly. All Hallows' Eve. The night had finally arrived. Restlessness, tension, and fear rushed through the wolves. Every man and woman displayed it but one, our king. My love, my mate. No matter how vulnerable he felt, that was a side that only I felt and experienced when we were alone. Today, as he stood at the front of the flanks of wolves, ready to lead us to battle, there was only confidence, power, and calmness exuding from him. "Everyone knows the plan. Remember your positions and remember the aim. Don't break ranks, don't panic, and look to your alphas for guidance." Alejandro spoke as he stood before everyone in nothing but a baggy pair of pants. Everyone listened, their faces somber and serious. I could sense their emotions: exhilaration, fear, worry, determination, confidence and pride, mixed with so much more. Marcel had managed to have his men united under him and, unsurprising to most of us but Marcel himself, his people were ready to join his pack and to be recognized as a pack in their own right. The Rossi brothers were truly an exception. Each one was born to lead, an alpha. Be prepared for the unexpected and for those who believe Seleni's watching out for us, then pray to her and ask for strength, because we are going to need it." He gave a cold smile looking out at the crowds. I could see him under the light, but I knew once we were fighting, I'm going to have to use my abilities to see. I knew what to do, and I'll be making sure to keep a protective shield around me for my baby. Thanks to Grandma Amelia, Liam, and myself, we had been able to pinpoint the exact location where the witch was buried. Liam was very intuitive, he always had been, but he was just calmer and quieter than I was. Working together, we had found the most likely spot and had set up some traps. 2.39 am. That was the precise timing that we would need to deliver the finishing blow. Before she channeled the power in this very area to resurrect the witches. There had been doubt raised several times about Dulsanra's words. I think my agreeing with Rayhan irked Alejandro a little too, but everyone knew that it was our best shot. It was a risk that we had to take, and Rayhan had been adamant that this was it. Once Alejandro had finished talking, everyone got ready, some meeting and talking to their mates or families, before those who were not going to fight joined the rest in the safe houses. The weather was cold and wet. It had rained on and off through the day and now it was just getting colder. I wore leather pants, a polo neck top with my necklace hidden inside, and a jacket over. My hair was pulled into a tight bun on top of my head, and I carried the staff that Alejandro had gotten for me. I looked at the time on my phone. 1.06 am. Liam came over to me. "Hey," I said. He smiled at me, and wrapped his arms around me tightly, kissing the top of my head. "It's going to be okay, all right." I looked up at him and nodded, my eyes stinging. That dreaded feeling was wrapped around me tightly and no matter what I did, I couldn't get rid of it, that deep, dark, foreboding feeling that was clawing at me, getting stronger with every passing minute. "Cheer up, Kia. He's going to be okay." He comforted me. Twins? I guess we still had that connection. "I'm terrified," I mouthed to him. I wasn't scared of battle, nor the enemy, but I was scared for my king, who was going to lead this attack. Unlike stories of kings and princes who rode into battle with others to protect him, Alejandro would be the one protecting the others. He had a full formation in place to protect me. But for himself, nothing. Liam hugged me tighter, his soothing scent calming me. "I'm not far from him. I'll try my best to watch his back," he said, very quietly, so no one heard. I nodded, "Thank you," I whispered. He kissed my forehead. I took a deep breath, pulling myself together. I had to be strong. "Okay, let's get to this," I said, spinning my staff. I looked over at Auntie Indy. Mom had tried to talk fighting, but she refused, insisting she needed to do this. Dad had initiated her into the Blood Moon Pack, but it hadn't helped. She was still quiet and I could see the pain in her eyes. Luckily, Mom had persuaded her to fight in the back ranks. We didn't know what Endora's army would consist of either. Marcel had said she had other witches, perhaps, we weren't sure. But if it was witches, then it was going to be extremely hard. Dr. Callum and Grandma Amelia had prepared some potions and herbs to help against witches, and we had weapons that were made by Alejandro's pack to fight against beasts like Manangals and Wendigos. Weapons that were going to be used tonight regardless of the enemy. Alejandro came over to me, a small smirk on his face. "Come with me," he said, taking my hand and tugging me along. "Where are we going?" I asked curiously. "Patience, amor mio. We're almost there." He stopped after a short while and scooped me bridal style. My heart thudded, and I wrapped my arms around his neck. I didn't want this moment to end. Ever. He kissed my lips softly as he continued on his way. We were out of the lighted area and I frowned, sensing we were getting deeper into the trees. "Alejandro. I'm curious, like I said, patience." He didn't give away more, and soon I saw a glow up ahead. I looked around curiously until we reached the small opening, and realized we were close to Mom and Dad's house. By the river, where I used to sit and read my favorite books. Under the very tree that I loved. A smile graced my face as I looked at the fairy lights that surrounded the tree, and on the ground a circle of lanterns and red petals. Petals that reminded me of the rose he had given me on the night of our marking ceremony, the rose that I had placed between the pages of a heavy book to preserve forever. "What is this? Just something, before goes down." He gave me that half-smile of his as he gently placed me on my feet in the middle of the circle of lights. "You know, it looks like you're going to." I trailed off, my heart pounding as he went down on one knee. I gasped, feeling a surge of emotions rush through me. I gazed into his dark glittering eyes as he looked at me with so much love that my heart was pounding. "Not the best of times, but I want you to know how much you mean to me. We've fallen in love. We've made it and we've marked one another. But no matter how much I do, I don't think I can ever show or express what you mean to me. So I thought, why not do what humans do too?" He took a deep breath and I could hear his racing heart, my own feeling like it was going to burst. "Will you marry me, amor mio? I know you're young and there's no rush, one day, when you yes. Goddess. I'd marry you tonight if it was an option." I whispered shakily, flinging my arms around his neck and knocking him to the ground. He let out a breathless chuckle, wrapping his arms around me as he caressed my back, kissing my neck and sending a shiver of pleasure through me. "I love you," I looked down at him, meaning it from the bottom of my heart. "Love you too, amor mio," he replied huskily, before we kissed passionately. Sparks ignited between us, and for a moment, everything was forgotten. We broke apart and he flipped open the box, to reveal a gorgeous, sparkly diamond ring as we sat up slowly. "I know it's not the most ideal but you can wear it around your neck if you want." "I love it," I said softly, and I truly did. Many werewolves got married, but most didn't exchange rings as we would destroy it when we shifted, but I loved it. My heart was roaring as he slipped it onto my finger, glittering beautifully under those fairy lights. "Thank you." He looked into my eyes, smiling softly, and I felt my emotions surfacing once more, but this time those tears were a mix of happiness and sadness. "Tomorrow morning, we're going to feel better, once all this over," he said softly, brushing his nose against my cheek. I nodded, I believed that. I would believe that no matter what. A distant howl was heard, and we looked up sharply, my heart racing. The signal. She was here. Andorra had arrived. Alejandro, I kissed Kiera fleetingly before we rushed back to our positions, calming myself for those who were looking to me for strength. I couldn't afford to feel anything but bloodthirst and confidence. How was it that it had all changed when she came into my life? I knew I'd be happy as long as she lived. But I also knew she needed more than just herself to live. Her parents, her brother, me. For Kiera, we had to win this. I unleashed my power, opening my link so that I could connect to all alphas. Alphas, who would then relay it to their packs. I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath as I focused, reaching far out into the woods that surrounded us. Honing in on the smallest animal or sound, getting past the hundreds of heartbeats of my wolves. We were spread out, disguised and hidden, then there were backup wolves far away in case we needed it. There it was, the silent movement of something dark. I couldn't hear any heartbeats or footsteps and my lips curled in disgust. Magic! Those in the northeast. Fire blindly in one go. She's there. I linked the alpha and my pack members who were holding that position. I wasn't sure if she'd have a deflecting spell, but we would give it our all. Silence followed before I heard the sharp wind whip through the trees and the shouts. They had obviously done some damage. I clenched my jaw, feeling 1, 4, 5 men lose their lives. They were the first line of defense. I was the second. We fight for the win, for our loved ones, our packs, and to destroy that here and now. Move! I ran ahead, a blur as many shifted. Bloodthirsty growls filled the air and a purple glow encircled us. I cast a glance behind me at Kiera, who was running just a few feet behind me. With Elijah, Liam, and Raphael flanking us. I signaled everyone to stop when I saw it, the darkness that blanketed the forest, pushing against my own aura. Her cold, undisguised, sinister laugh filled the air. Foolish! To think that wolves can defeat me. It's good to see you again, son. Kiera, my heart was thudding as I saw the glowing magic blanket the area. My eyes blazed and I let my own aura out. I was not going to let her work whatever magic she was trying to. Grandma Amelia had given me some strange tips, but unquestioningly I was willing to listen to them. Our conversation echoed in my mind. My only worry is that my power depletes fast. Now don't be stupid, like your useless father. I like to think you're your mother's daughter. Draw your power from your source. What source? Selene's, of course. The moon. I didn't know if it would work, but I intended to find out. The moon was high up in the sky, even if it was the night where witches were at their strongest, the moon was still dazzling brightly. I heard Andorra hiss in annoyance as she turned her gaze to me, her magic pushing against mine. You won't hold out for long. She chuckled. Throwing her arms up, she began chanting. We moved fast, lunging at her, but her barriers held us off. I couldn't see if she was alone or not, just thick darkness that even my power couldn't penetrate. I heard shouts and shrieks, feeling several more wolves die. Each one sent a painful, sharp tug through me. We were already losing men. Witches! Someone from our pack shouted. There are about 4 other witches. Dad said coldly. And so much more. Alejandro growled. It took me a second to realize what he meant when several things burst from the darkness. There was no way to describe them. They weren't wolves, nor were they wendigos, but they looked to be a mix between them both. What terrified me most was the intelligence within their eyes. "Look, daughter of Selene! Look at what I can accomplish!" Endora shrieked. I didn't have time to reply, springing forward and engaging the first. "Alpha Marcel said to let you know that some of the wendigos are wolves that were thought dead. Someone told us through the link." We were all interrelaying, making sure everyone was in on stuff. Obviously, it made sense why she didn't make the rogues band together as a pack. Marcel would know if someone was dead or not. Sure, she could use magic, but it would have been harder for her. Leave the wendigos to the rest. Let's focus on Endora. Alejandro's words came through the link as I deflected an attack, blasting the thing back. Unlike the usual mindless, bloodthirsty beasts, this one had the mind and fighting skills of a trained wolf. "Got it!" I shouted, cutting one of their heads off. Scarlet, it was a mess. These wendigos were nothing like the others. They were practically stronger wolves. Looking at them standing on 2 feet, their speed and their agility, I felt sick to say they reminded me of lichens. Yes, they weren't exactly like Alejandro, but the disturbing similarities worried me. I could feel the impact of their hits, feel the bond break when we lost someone. "Damon! Careful! I do not want Monica coming for me," I growled, watching him take on 2 beasts. "I can handle myself, Auntie Red." His confident smile came as he ripped through a wendigo. "He's a big boy, Scarlet." Aaron's voice came. I shook my head at the father and son. I was about to shift when I felt unease settling in. I sensed her before I heard or smelled her. "A witch! Ah, take out the leader, the rest will fall." A whispery voice came. The next thing I knew, I couldn't see anything as heavy darkness surrounded me. "Scarlet!" Aaron's panicked voice came. "Be careful!" I shouted, only to feel a block. I couldn't hear anyone through the link anymore. "Aaron? Aaron?" Nothing. I felt something rush at me and barely jumped out of the way. We were in some whirling section of darkness and I could feel the barrier that was stopping anyone from entering. It was then that I finally saw her, her long red hair swirling around her, her gold eyes glowing, and the smile of pure malice on her face. "1-to-1 is fair, right?" she asked. I saw the runes that covered her body, wondering what they meant. "Do you really think killing us is the right thing to do?" I asked coldly. "Who knows?" She brushed off. She whispered a spell and I lunged at her. She blasted me back, flames wrapping around me, burning my skin. I bit my lip, drawing blood as dared not let anyone feel my pain. Not my pack, nor Elijah. I was stronger than this. I wouldn't scream. No matter how agonizing this was, my body was shrieking in agony as I tried to wait to heal myself. I forced myself to shift and lunged at her. She tried to blast me back, but she hadn't expected me to be able to shift already. It seemed she didn't realize I was a fast healer. I slammed her to the ground, ready to rip her head off, when I was torn off her and thrown against the swirling barrier. I hissed in pain, feeling as if my entire back had been shaved by jagged sandpaper. The smell of my blood filled my nose as I stumbled to my feet and lurched at the witch. She sent another blast of fire, knocking me back. How was I supposed to attack her when I couldn't even get close to her? I got to my feet, my grey fur matted with blood and the strong smell of burnt flesh. My eyes were blazing silver as I looked straight into her glowing ones. The rage and determination ripped through me as I pounced. Indigo, my heart tore in fear when I saw Scarlet being wrapped in that hurricane of darkness. No. Not Scarlet. The strong urge to protect her overcame me. I was not going to lose another loved one. I was rushing towards the darkness, when a strong hand gripped my arm and yanked me back. "What are you doing?" Marcel growled. I glared at him. I didn't know him enough to judge, but right now, I didn't need a Rossi telling me what to do. "Don't tell me what I can and cannot do," I growled back. "Scarlet needs me." He let go of me to rip a Wendigo apart, slicing through it with one of his long twin blades. He was actually an impressive swordsman, something you wouldn't see often in wolves, but right now it was helping against the Wendigo's long dangerous claws that were like 12-inch knives. "You can't go," he muttered, and I knew instantly someone had told him to watch out for me. I turned, about to run off when he grabbed me by the back of my shirt. "What the actual?" I shrieked, glancing at Dad, who was fighting one of the Wendigos. Elijah hadn't been happy with him joining, but he had refused to back off, saying he would not stand by when his children were fighting. He also refused to leave Scarlet alone. But now he was tired. I looked around assessing the monsters. So far there were at least 30. I don't know how she had an army that even Marcel hadn't known of, but she had. I glared at Marcel. "If you had kept an eye on your rogues, this wouldn't have happened." I spat. He frowned at me. "Really? Seriously? We're going to blame Throne now? Not all these Wendigos were rogues. And besides, rogues mean lone wolves. I was not accountable for all of them." He growled back. "I'll go to Scarlet." I snapped. "I don't need a Rossi to tell me what to do." He frowned but let go of me. I ran towards the blazing whirlpool, only for strong arms to lift me up as we went barreling through. A burning pain screamed through me as the heat of that whirling force field melted through my skin and flesh. I screamed in agony, knowing those arms were protecting me from the worst of it. Suddenly it was gone. I gasped for breath, my body crying in pain. Realizing we had made it in. "You all!" the red-headed woman hissed. I saw Scarlet shifting back to human form, her entire body covered in burns. I could see the blood and melted skin. I looked at the man who was carrying me, and I saw Marcel's eyes blazing as he set me down, lunging at the witch. "Oh, look what we have here, a Rossi!" she scoffed, blasting him back. He ducked, shifting, and sprang at her. This time, despite her ball of flame, he knocked her to the ground. I took the chance and rushed to Scarlet. "Hey, you okay? Why are you here?" She growled at me, her anger and worry clear in her eyes. "Because," I said. "Because you're my sister." I couldn't say it. I had always pretended she didn't mean all that much to me, but it wasn't true. "Because I wanted to," I shot back. I grabbed one of Marcel's discarded swords and ran towards the witch. A burst of flames slammed me back. I rolled away, getting to my feet only to see Scarlet shifting once again, mostly healed. Thank the goddess for her abilities. As one, we ran at the witch whilst she chanted a spell. Marcel managed to rip one of her arms off. I saw flames wrap around him as he growled, and was thrown back. The witch fell to her knees. Her runes now glowing. How dare he! How dare you all! She shrieked. We blocked and ducked her attacks, but the place was tight. Scarlet! I murmured. I heal well. I'm ending this now. She said confidently through the link. My heart thumped. Everything felt like slow motion from there. The fleeting happiness to fight alongside my sister. A sister I always admired but never dared to admit. My true queen. The look of determination on Scarlet's face. The all too well-known fact that she was reckless. The way she went forward, ignoring the witch's chanting. No, don't risk it, Scar. The words never formed on my lips as I watched Scarlet continue forward, extremely fast, when a ball of magic flames was thrown at her, illuminating the darkness in flames. I saw Scarlet knock the witch to the ground, watching the blast rip her off and throw her to the ground. It was happening so fast. But no, it can't. I lunged forward just as the witch moved her hand back. Magic swirled around it, aiming for Scarlet's chest as she lay there battered in her human form. Her body was shaking as she tried to get up. Not my sister. I heard a faint shout from Marcel. The clang of metal hitting the floor as the weapon slipped from my hand. I couldn't think of anything but the fact I needed to protect her, to repay the debt to the woman who had always protected me since I was a child. The one who shielded me from everything, my queen, my goddess, my protector. My sister. Marcel, my body screamed in pain as I forced myself up. I saw Scarlet attack but the witch was still strong. I tried to move but I couldn't. I watched as the younger alpha female ran to protect her sister. My heart rang in my ears as I jumped forward, but I was too late. The witch plunged her hand into the girl's chest, my own chest tightening at the sight of her heart being torn from her rib cage. But what hit most was the look of content sadness on her face. I would never forget it. Scarlet's scream pierced the air as she caught her sister's body, and I ripped the witch to shreds. She hadn't expected me to get up, but with the damage that Scarlet and I had inflicted upon her, she had been considerably weakened already. No. No. Goddess, no! Scarlet shouted, as the black whirlwind dissipated. I wasn't going to take chances as I tossed her heart to a nearby wolf who finished it off, devouring it. We need Kiera. Kiera's in battle, she can't come. It's too late for her. Aaron, Elijah's beta, said quietly as he placed a shirt around Scarlet's naked body. No. She shouted. Take her back. Jackson, the old alpha said about Scarlet, his face pale as he looked at the body that she clung to. Aaron looked at me, seeing I was in a worse state, and motioned for me to go. I nodded, trying to lift her, but she refused to let go of her sister. In the end, I simply guided her away. I could feel the panic within her. Call Kiera. She can heal. She begged me. Only if there's something to heal, her heart's gone. I said quietly as we made our way away towards the pack house. I needed to get her to safety. The sound of shouts and howls filled the air. I stopped when the old, wise she-wolf of the pack approached. Her eyes glistened with tears and a knowing look. Something told me she knew so much more than she let on. "Come with me," she murmured. "Auntie. Auntie. We need Kiara." "Elijah isn't replying," Scarlet cried. Her heart was pounding. I could tell she was losing all the self-control the alpha female usually possessed. The elderly woman didn't speak, leading us away from the pack house and towards a small cottage that I had seen several times. She opened the door as I lifted Scarlet through the door as she clung to her sister's body. "Call Kiara, for goddess's sake. Listen to me, Scarlet." The woman growled, slapping the younger woman sharply across the face. Scarlet stilled, as if suddenly snapping out of whatever trance she had been in. As if the sheer reality of the situation was finally settling in. "Indigo is dead. But we can save the child." "How?" Scarlet asked. I could see the desperation in her eyes as the reality of the situation hit her. "We have no time to explain, but are you ready to carry the child?" Amelia asked. "Carry the child? I will transfer the child to you," Amelia said, quietly looking at Scarlet. "Magic? But how would Amelia do that?" "Of course, I'll do anything for Indigo," Scarlet said, hugging her sister's body to herself. Amelia smiled as she hurried away to get certain herbs. I frowned. She wasn't a witch, or she didn't seem to be one. There were disguising spells, but no, there was nothing that screamed witch from this woman. "Oh, I'm not a witch boy." "Well, not really. I have always had a certain eye for some stuff, and well, perhaps I have some witch lineage. But I think I can do this." I had felt a little unsettled, so I gave both Indigo and Kiara some herbs, just in case. To prolong the pup's life if this happened. "I did hope I was young," she murmured, gathering jars. Was Kiara pregnant? And she was out there risking it all? "Do you need help?" I asked. "Well, why don't you cover that junk first? Shameless men. If you're thinking of getting lucky, I'm too old for such things," she complained. I suddenly realized there was anything wrong with that. Nudity was common in wolves. But it was clear the woman wasn't going to stop. "There are some shorts outside by those trees, and then just clear the space away, we need them both to be lying side to side." I did as she asked, finding some shorts before I returned and swiftly cleared the floor. She began drawing symbols with the herbs and the salts. Scarlet lay down in that star, careful not to ruin the markings. "We are running out of time. Marcel, place Indigo's body in this star." I saw the sadness in the old woman's eyes as she looked at the dead woman. I knew what loss felt like. I had suffered it too. My mate. The burning anger for revenge against Endora filled me, but I knew right now I needed to be here to assist. I did what she said and she looked at me. "There's one vital point you need to do, son. When I transfer the child, there will be a connection between the four of us." She motioned to the two women and herself. "When you see that formation, it will be visible, the moment Scarlet's and the pups become one. I need you to break where these three stars join." I nodded, frowning as I realized she had made a third sta. One she herself was seated in. It was at that moment I realized that, as planned, 2 lives were still going to be lost. Defying nature held a price. To save the pup who was meant to die, she was going to sacrifice her own life. My heart thumped as Amelia looked at me, her eyes twinkling as she smiled slowly. She knew I had figured it out. "Remember what you must do," I simply nodded. "Let's do this," Scarlett said, in a panicked state. Amelia nodded. "Fear not, I will manage this." Scarlett simply nodded as she closed her eyes, tears spilling down her cheeks. I wonder what she would think when she realized that she wouldn't get to say goodbye to Amelia either. Damon Indigo was dead. I didn't know what to think. I felt useless. Despite doing my best to hold the ranks, once the witch was gone I thought it would get better, but it didn't. Another one came and took her place. Her grey hair was waving around her crazily, as she lashed out at us with never-ending spears of ice. Our team were doing their best. Dad, Alpha Jackson, and I were up against the witch. I hated how they were long-distance attackers and we needed to get up close. "Okay, a plan. Aaron, I want you to play the decoy, I will go for the frontal attack. Damon, I need you to do the finishing job. You're the fastest of the 3 of us," Alpha Jackson said. Despite the loss of his daughter, he was still in control, like a true alpha. "Got it," Dad and I said in unison. I worked fast, pretending to attack. Picking up of Marcel's swords, I ran at her, ducking her shards before I let one hit my arm, tumbling to the side on purpose. "Useless mutt!" she spat in her raspy voice. No, we weren't useless. But what really hit me was that if witches wanted, they sure could cause us a lot of damage. This was why the saying, "Kill a witch on sight, ask questions later" even existed. Alpha Jackson ran at her, his large wolf letting out a piercing roar before he swiped at her, which she blocked with a wall of ice. He went flying to the ground as Dad jumped in next. He was younger and faster than Alpha Jackson. I got myself ready, letting both of them attack the witch, waiting for my chance. It was a mess of blood, shooting daggers of ice, wolves, and the witch. Around us, the remaining wolves were fighting the Wendigos. Some tried to help us, only to be killed by the witch instantly. I needed to rip her heart out of her chest. I silently made my way forward just as she cackled, clapping her hands together. All I saw was Alpha Jackson's wolf impaled from all sides. The last thing I saw was his wolf's eyes widening before the witch opened her hands, tearing his body to pieces. My heart was racing as I tried my best not to react crazily. I saw Dad's eyes blazing as he lunged at her, ducking and diving. I made my move. I didn't trust her not to do the same to Dad, so I lunged at her. My hand went through her chest. Just as she whispered something, the runes that I had never noticed on her body began to glow. We won. Or so I thought. Just as I ripped her heart from her chest, a smirk of victory on my face as I looked at Dad, my smile vanished. Dad crumbled to the ground before me. His heartbeat was steadily fading. "How sad!" the witch whispered, before her body crumbled forward. I squeezed her heart in my grasp, destroying it completely as I rushed to Dad. "Dad! I shouted as I heard his heartbeat vanish completely. No, please no. Damon. Your father. Mom's voice screamed in my head. Please no. Dad. Come on, man. I shouted. How had he? I looked down, noticing the blood that was pouring out of his body. My eyes flashed as I looked at the Wendigo who was staring at me intensely. I lunged at it, slamming it to the ground as I ripped its head clean off of its body. My heart was thudding as I looked at the scattered bodies of my pack mates. Damon. Who have we lost? Uncle L's voice came in my head. He sounded exhausted. My heart clenched as I wondered if he knew about Indigo. I looked at the moon, wishing the goddess would help us. Dad. Alpha Jackson, and Indigo, I replied quietly. Silence. He had lost his best friend, father, and sister all in one night. I looked down. I don't think Selene really cares. I felt dead as I turned to the Wendigos before me. My hatred only grew as I leapt towards the closest one. Elijah, she was stronger than I could have ever anticipated. Raphael, Liam, Alejandro, and Kiera. Combined, we were still losing. She was channeling the power within the earth, magic that had lain dormant for years. We were able to keep her away from the location she was seeking, but with each attack we were forced to retreat, and we were now getting closer to that spot. I, like every other Alpha and Luna, could feel the pack link breaking away. I had lost count of how many we had lost. At times, I lost the pack link thanks to Endora's magic, and at other times I was able to catch snippets. I felt Scarlet's anguish, but I knew she was okay. I couldn't connect to her. It took my all not to break ranks and go to her. I knew, if Endora got the upper hand, we were all dead. Kiera was a powerhouse. Her power was raging around her. I knew for a fact that without her we would be dead already. Endora's body was full of runes and she was chanting non-stop. No matter how much we tried, she was able to keep us at arm's length. Kiera was flitting between forcing her back and healing us. I could feel her channeling the power of the moon at times. Endora realized this too, and it only made her angrier. Her army of Wendigos was depleting, but she was not failing. She's taking their life sources. The more we kill, the stronger she gets. Kiera suddenly shouted. Endora chuckled. Oh? So you finally figured it out? She spat. Kiera didn't reply as she and Alejandro tried to break through her barrier, only for her to throw them back. It was the same, Raphael, Liam and I would try, then Alejandro and Kiera, but we couldn't. Raphael, is this any way to treat your mother? She taunted. My mother is dead. Raphael said quietly. We knew we were drawing this out, to the precise moment she was at her weakest. That was our chance. I slashed through another Wendigo. We just had to keep going. I felt two pack links break, a strong pain rushed through me and my heart pounded. Someone close to me. That link. I just knew it wasn't Scarlet. Damon, who have we lost? I asked quietly through the link. Dad. Alpha Jackson. And Indigo. I felt as if I had just been punched in the guts. My best friend, father, and sister. The baby. I licked my lips, trying to fight back the pain that was threatening to consume me. Scarlet? I asked, trying to control my voice. Marcel took her to safety. Damon's reply came. You're next in charge. Hold your defense. Yes, Alpha, came his quiet yet angry reply. We had both lost our fathers. But now was not the time to mourn. I looked at Endora, feeling the very same hatred I had felt for Zidane years ago ignite within me like a volcano that had just erupted. Scarlet, this pain, it hurt, feeling the pack link snap several times. Not knowing who we had lost and who was alive. But right now, all I could do was carry my sister's child. Indigo had sacrificed herself for me. She had died to protect me. Why? I hated that I didn't get to say goodbye. Why did she do it? I could have possibly healed. Why did she risk her and her baby's life? It was my duty as her big sister to protect her, not the other way around. I looked at Amelia, my heart thudding as I saw the glow that surrounded Indigo's stomach. The faint beat of the baby's heart was fading fast. I felt something wrap around me, feeling a sudden tug within me, and I watched in awe as the glow lifted from Indigo's stomach. My eyes widening as I realized it was WI upped around a small F0ETUS. It traveled along the glowing thread that was linking us as it came towards me. I gasped as I felt the strong pressure around my stomach, a split second of pain, something pulling and then a strong push on my stomach. I felt the stretch within me and knew it had worked, watching the light that settled around my stomach vanish and the faint sound of a beating heart grow strong within me. I looked at Amelia, who was shaking, her eyes glistening as she looked relieved with sweat coating her forehead. I realized then that she had not been sure if it would work. I didn't care that she had some level of witchcraft within her, or that she was part witch. It didn't change how much I loved her. It made sense that she'd always had a knack for knowing things. I wished she had told us though. It's not like we would have judged. Take care of yourself, Amelia said to me. Before I could respond, I noticed Marcel step forward, swiping his foot through the ashes and herbs that linked the 3 boxes. Good boy, Amelia whispered, before she slumped backwards. Marcel caught her and I sat up as he lay her down. What's happened? I asked, hurrying over to her. My stomach twisted when I realized there was now one less heartbeat in this room. She's gone, a life for a life. The pup was meant to die, but she sacrificed herself for it to live, to even the balance. His deep voice resonated in my head as I realized I had just lost one more person on this night. I loosed my eyes, placing a hand on my stomach. For Indy and Grandma Amy, I would always protect this child. Marcel left me alone, giving me a moment to grieve the loss of my loved ones. But I was an alpha and I needed to return to the battlefield. I stood up, fixing the shirt that Aaron had given me earlier. It was time for these witches to go to hell, exactly where they belonged. Join our Facebook and WhatsApp group for more updates, link is given in description. Rest audiobook will be continued in next episode.